Hello and welcome back to the Scale Modelling Cafe, and welcome to the final part of the Clearprop Polikarpov I-16 Type 5 project in 1/72 scale. In this video I'm going to detail the painting and weathering of this teeny tiny little model, and it all started with a primer coat. My primer of choice is Mr. Surfacer 1200, and this was thinned a little bit thinner than I normally would, just because the rivet detail and the panel line detail is so fine on this little thing. I didn't want to clog it up with too many layers. And it really doesn't take very long at all. I tend to polish in between paint layers. This is just using a little bit of polishing cloth, a little bit of water, just to smooth the paint out, especially in the wing roots, but actually it was really smooth anyway. I just find by polishing each layer of paint, it does leave it nice and smooth. The white identification bands came first actually, so this is MRP, and it doesn't take long just to build up a nice really thin opaque white coat there, and I'm just kind of feathering out the white. I have found it can affect the underside colour, or sorry, the top colour. Talking of the underside colour, this is MRP, I think it's 35270 FS, that is one of the American colours. It was a nice sort of light grey tone, not too cold, not too warm. Worked to treat. And this was just built up in an opaque layer. I don't do pre-shading. I haven't done it for an extremely long time. I don't like pre-shading. It's not very realistic. To work, you have to use a transparent layer of paint over the top, which alters the hue. And one pass too many, and you've wasted all that time. So a nice opaque coat, and then we'll go in with a bit of post-shading. So adding a bit of white to the base coat paint, that was just applied in sort of random squiggles on the flat areas, and then over the top of the ribs and some of the raised detail, just to break things up a bit. All over single colour grey can be quite difficult actually to deal with, but this is actually quite subtle. Now for the green on the top. This was a mix of Guns RLM 80, which is a nice sort of deep, vibrant green, but it's quite dark, and then a little bit of IJN green from Tamiya, just so it's not too dark and too olivey. Taking the cap off the end of the needle, and I went in and I just sprayed the demarcation freehand. Taking the cap off the end of the needle, you have to be very careful obviously not to ding your needle, which would be a right nightmare, but it means you get a much tighter spray pattern. And then once that was done, the rest of the airframe was just finished off. Again, no pre-shading. It just went down a nice opaque single colour. Not forgetting the front, the shutters, cooling shutter thing, that was slid around to protect the engine. And then on the underside, I used a bit of masking tape, but I didn't quite get it right first time, so I just had to adjust the tape, and then I went in and finished off. And there's the top coat complete. As with the underside, it was in with the post shading next, and you've got to be quite careful with green. If you just add white, it can really wash the colour out, and it doesn't look nice at all. So I added a little bit of white to just lighten it, and then a little bit of yellow just to keep the vibrancy of the green. And there you can see how sort of varied and interesting that leaves the finish. As I mentioned earlier, I polish in between coats, and this really is my go-to. It's an old Miracle sander by Mastercasters. I've had it donkey's years, it's really well worn, and it's perfect for just buffing paint. Now I could have just left it like this and put the decals on, but I decided to go with a gloss coat, and if you polish the paint before the gloss coat, you get a much shinier gloss for a start, and it's much smoother, and you also use much less of the gloss varnish. This is GX 100 from Guns. It's absolutely amazing stuff. Works an absolute treat. You see there, I've just shoved a cocktail stick in that cooling vent thing that I drilled out earlier, which actually makes a really neat handle. And this is going to make decaling an absolute dull. Putting the setting solution, both of them from Ammo, the set and the sole. So setting solution, and you know it's a good gloss coat when it all starts beading up. One of the other reasons of using a gloss coat, it's many actually, but the reason I do it is it helps to hide the carrier film. I'm not worried about silvering because the paint was very smooth. What I tend to do is sandwich the decal in between a couple of layers of gloss, and then I'll go in, and you'll see me in a minute, I'll just polish the paint, and it helps to even out the surface of the decal and really helps to hide the edge of that carrier film. Going back in with the sole over the top, and there's no panel lines or anything there, but it will just help to melt the decal into that gloss. Just checking the numbers there, making sure it's all symmetrical. And again over the gloss surface with that fluid underneath, it makes it really easy to slide that decal around. And again, just using that cotton bud just to squeeze out any excess setting solution from underneath, and then it'll be ready for the sole. You see quite a colourful little aeroplane, that, with the light blue on the tail. And then I'll go and leave that overnight to dry off. And then the next day, just with a bit of a damp kitchen towel, I'll go in and I'll just wipe away any excess setting solution or anything like that, any of the water stains. And then we can seal it in with another thin layer of gloss. See how shiny that looks. Okay, bit of a word of warning. If you're going to do this technique and there's raised detail, be very careful, because it's really easy to just go over a little bit too much and just sand some of that decal off some of the high points. So just be careful. Take your time. That's a really fine grit on that sanding sponge, and it's well worn. And that's just going to help even out the surface and help to minimise the carrier film, as you can see there. All that was sealed in with some VMS satin varnish, and then it was on to the oil paints. And I thought I'd try something different on this one, rather than doing my standard oil dot weathering technique, where I go in and I just put the dots, all the different colours oil paints, strategically all over where I want them, and then blend them all in at once. I thought I'd just do it a little bit at a time, just to give me more control. So using this small brush, I added the oil paint. It was blended in just a little bit. That's thinned a little bit, that oil paint. And then just going in with the dry brush, just to feather that in and blend it in. And I went over multiple times with different colours. A sort of a buff, a white, a yellow, for a bit of paint fading. and then a dark green, a shadow brown, and a Starship Filth. Went in there and did the low lights and around some of the detail just to help make that detail pop. Going in there, blending it in with a tiny bit of thinner. And this technique really gives you control, and you can really play around with these effects. And if you don't like it, just add a bit of thinner, get rid of it. And I'm just adding bit onto bit onto bit, going back light and dark, and just picking out all that stuff, all that detail. Stuff's a bit vague, isn't it? So fading in the on some of the raised panels that were some of the metal panels. I wanted to differentiate between the different materials that the aeroplane was made out of as well, and this is a great way to do that. Now this does take longer than the oil dot weathering. If I did this oil dot weathering on this aeroplane, 15 minutes and it would all be done, but as I said, I wanted a little bit more control on this one. It was such a beautiful little kit, I think it deserved it. Going back in here over the ailerons and flaps, just picking out that raised fabric detail. And then just blending that in. You can see little tapping motions. There's a little bit of thinner on that brush. And again, repeat, going back over and just playing with it until I was happy. So I think what I'll do, I'll just leave you with the music now, and you can just hear how I do this in real time. There's the finish effect on that inner wing. It is quite subtle. Just picking at the edge of the cowling there in the lighter colour. Again, I've done the dark behind it that you can see. Obviously the cowling was metal. And then going in on this panel line, which was really fine, and that would really struggle to take a wash, I think. It could be done, but I thought, why not go in and play with the oils and do a sort of thin bit of oil paint around there, blend it in, and again, just playing with these products. And the same on the underside, just using that the dark tone just to get that sort of dirty, oily, grimy effect just around the cowling, along the panel lines, and just playing. It was great fun. Right, I said I was going to leave you with some music, so here goes. And there is the finished oil paint. As you can see, it's added to that post shading. And talking of post shading, we're going to do a little bit more now. So this is like a dirty tone, a mix of black and red brown from Tamiya, heavily thinned. Needle cap removed. And I'm just going to go in, I'm going to do some exhaust staining with that. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to go around some of the more grimy areas of the panel lines and just slowly build it up, and just to add to that grimy effect. So it's all about layering. So we've done the initial post shading, the base coat, we've done the oils, and now we've gone in and we've done the sort of grime over the top. This is a neat product. This is from Ammo. It's aluminium tape. So this was just put in place and then burnished down with a cocktail stick. The aeroplane had this sort of chrome ring round it. It's a feature of the old Soviet aeroplanes. And it works an absolute treat on this. They do chrome as well, but I thought aluminium would be better in scale. And now for some subtle paint chipping. Just around some of the metal panels, the gun covers, that kind of thing. Nothing too much at all. And the home stretch, so time for the dangly bits. The undercarriage, which were made up before, painted and weathered. They got glued in place. Little bit of a fiddle, because they are really actually quite complicated and very, very fine. I do think, as I said in the previous episode, construction, it would have been easier to actually build these on the model. The wheels are highly detailed and they just pop into place. I tend to drill out the bottom of the wheel, mount that on a cocktail stick and then paint them. So the holes in the bottom, they're going to be hidden obviously. And we're almost there. It's just the little dangly bits to go now. Which, here, they're pretty much all done. So the pito's on, the guns are done. They were replaced with a bit of very fine Albion alloys tubing, because I did snap them off. See the canopies on, the exhausts. And the final thing is just the prop. Just fussing there, just making sure everything's... I'm happy with it, and it's all done. And here it is. And I have to say, what a lovely, lovely little kit this is. It's amazingly detailed. The fit is superb. And it's a beautiful little thing. I'm really tempted to get a couple of these and do some of the other markings. I feel a Spanish Civil War one might be quite good fun. They were very colourful. And they are due to do one in 48th, and it's given me a real appreciation for Clearprop. And I've already got the H75N, which is going to come to the channel soon, and a couple of the Sonias in 72nd and 144. So stay tuned for more Clearprop stuff. I'll just leave you with a little bit of spinny stuff and some stills, and I'll see you on the next one. So thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.